Alright, hello everybody, welcome back to another homesteading how-to today. So, I've got something a little different, something a little fun, something a little weird for you today. What we're going to be doing today is we are going to be making carrot cake jam. So this is going to be a jam with carrots and tastes like carrot cake. And yeah, so carrots, of course, kind of come in the fall. It's still fall time when I'm making this. You know, cooler weather is a big one for carrots, and it also makes use of apples as part of the base for it. So, of course, being fall time, it's apple time. So this is another way for us to use up some of our apples that we've got in abundance right now, and make a tasty little treat, something a little different. So let's go ahead and get started on that. Okay, so first things first, let's go over our ingredients real quick. I am being a little bit on the lazy side, and I am buying carrots pre-shredded to use for this instead of doing all the shredding and grating myself. You might want them a little bit more finely grated or shredded than this, but I think it'll be fine. I think having slightly bigger pieces, and they're going to cook down some. So, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this is going to turn out awfully, but that's what we're doing. Okay, it also makes use of canned pineapple. I don't know. I haven't tried it with fresh, so I don't know how that would work. You probably need to make some adjustments for liquid because we're going to use the full can, including juice. You want to make sure it's unsweetened. Yes, it's Walmart brand. Get over it. Okay? And then, already measured out, I have our spices: cinnamon, clove, nutmeg. Nothing serious. Lemon juice, apples that I'll need to cut, and then fruit pectin. And of course, sugar. Now, this is a really great brand of pectin. I've been using it for a while. I will say one thing with it. It's not quite as strong as like the Sure Gel or whatnot that you would get in the normal grocery stores. So you do have to use a little bit more of this particular brand, I've noticed, than any recipe you are following would call for. I'm going to still give you the amount that the recipe is going to call for as the recipe on the comments in this. But just know that if you happen to get this like I do, which you can get it off of Amazon, then you need to increase that by about 50%. So just be aware of that. So let's go ahead and dice apples, and we'll get started here on getting it all together. Okay, so here we go. Now, when I'm gonna just dice up apples like we're doing here, this is going to be a little wasteful on the core, but it's a speed thing more than anything. So we need about I got to grab my measuring cup. We need about 3 cups of apples. You could use pears as well if you're so inclined. I have apples, so that's why I'm using apples. If I had pears and not apples, that's what I would be using. That's for sure. But either one. And now, one little tip and trick for you. If you grow your own apples or pears that you use to make jams or jellies or anything like that, if you can, using ones that are harvested before you get a frost in your area is the way to go. So what happens is, after a frost, an enzyme in the apple activates. I got a bad spot in that apple, it looks like. So, yeah, that's all right. We'll cut it out. There we go. But anyway, there's an enzyme in the apple that activates after a frost that deactivates a lot of the natural pectin that occurs in them. And apples and pears have a lot of natural pectin. Pectin is the substance in fruit, for those unaware, that causes your jams and jellies to gel. So it deactivates a lot of those natural pectins. The enzyme breaks them down specifically, and your apples and pears get sweeter at that point. So when you're wanting to eat your apples or your pears, or make juice or something like that out of them, like harvesting them before the frost or after the frost is kind of the way you want to do it. There's 1 cup. But when you're doing something like making a jam or a jelly or even apple butter, which is kind of like a much thicker sweet applesauce for those unfamiliar. You can also do it with pears, so pear butter in that case. Getting the ones that haven't been hit by that frost so that the pectin is more prevalent. You know, it's not to say that, you know, after a frost there's zero pectin in these things and anything you make isn't going to gel or anything like that. That's not the case. But there's more of it still in the fruit before the frost. And so it makes jellies and jams that set up better. Because if you've ever made jams or jellies before, you'll know that sometimes, not always, but sometimes, it can be quite a pain to get your jelly to gel. And so having that extra naturally occurring pectin in the fruit helps with that. Here's our second cup. Now, the kind of apples I'm using happen to just be from my apple trees, which I am not sure what variety they are, because they were mature when I bought the property a few years ago. So I'm really not sure what they are. I believe, from research I've done, they're Haralson apples. Those are apparently a fairly common variety planted around here. So it wouldn't surprise me if that is what they are. And I'm going to just stop measuring this. I think we're going to do this apple and one more. I think that's probably going to be good. Might be a little bit extra, but it won't hurt to have a little extra apple in there. Yeah, anyway, so Haralson apples are kind of a good all-around apple. They're good for eating, great for cooking. They have made some wonderful pies this year, that's for sure. Now, one other thing too that I'm obviously not doing is you can peel these beforehand. It's not going to make a big difference in the overall end product. Especially since we're cutting them up pretty small. So you're not going to have these huge chunks of peel in your jam. And if these were going to be much larger pieces, there's another little bit of a bad spot in this apple too. But if these were going to be much larger pieces, then I might be a little more inclined to peel them first. But as you can see, we're making fairly small pieces. Okay. Almost done here with this portion of it anyway. Okay, there we go. Here's all of our apple in there. Then we're just going to add this carrot. Now, because I had bought pre-shredded carrots, I did rinse them off real good just to make sure there was, just to make sure they were rinsed off real good and there's not a bunch of other junk on them. So, dump that in. Need to set this down for 1 second. There we go. So then we're going to do, like I said, it's 2 cans, in this case, of pineapple with the juice right on in. There we go. That one didn't want to open very much. And then just double check our recipe here. Okay, all of our spices and our lemon juice. So in goes the lemon juice. In goes the spices. Now if this looks like it's not very juicy yet. Don't worry, because as things cook, they will release more liquid into this. And of course, as we add our sugar later, that will also liquefy and give us the volume that we need for our jam. So now what we're going to do, we're going to turn this on high and let it come up to a boil, and then we'll turn the heat down and let it simmer for a while so our carrots and our apples can soften up some before we carry on with the rest of it. Alright, so as mentioned, as we can see, well, hopefully you can see, yeah, you can see, good. As it cooks, the liquid comes out for sure. So, we're going to let that simmer. We're going to turn this down. We'll let this simmer until some of these fruits and vegetables get a little more tender. Be about 15 minutes. And, yeah, so we'll let that go. Check in on it a time or two during that 15 minutes and stir it around, make sure it's not burning. But there we are. Step one out of the way. Okay, here we go. Not quite there yet. Still got a few minutes left. As we can see, somewhat as the steam fades. We've got quite a bit of moisture released, and it's cooking down. So, as we are softening up, doing what we need to do so we can make it into a nice jam. Still have about 4.5 minutes left, so let this keep going for a little bit longer yet. Okay, 10 seconds. So, there we go. That time is done. So there we are. Now, you need both hands for this. And just set you right like this. Now I've got 1.25 cups of our pectin. And we're just gonna sprinkle that around in there. And we're gonna stir it in real good. When you're using powdered pectin like this, if it clumps a little bit, it's not usually a huge deal, because it'll usually dissolve, but you want to try and avoid much of that as you can. Okay, and we're going to turn that back up to high. And you can see, like, that liquid is already way less runny, and the pectin hasn't even properly set yet. So we're going to let this come up to a good boil. Now when you're using powdered pectin, you usually want to put that in before you add your sugar, which you can see I have measured out right there. Because pectin needs a certain amount of time with the heat to gel properly. And so by adding the pectin first, letting it come up to its boil and boil for a minute, literally a minute, and then you add your sugar, and then repeat that process, let it come up to a boil for literally a minute, usually that is sufficient. Because of course, once you add this stuff in, it'll cool it back down. And the annoying thing with pectin, though, is if you let it cook too long, then it'll start breaking back down. And then it's not going to gel anymore. So you have to be a little careful. Okay. That's looking pretty good. So what we're going to do, just go ahead. And this is, again, I'm doing a double batch, so this is 13 cups of sugar for this. So it's 6.5 normally. We'll just add all that in and then start stirring. As the sugar heats, it'll melt and turn into liquid, obviously, because that's what melting means. I don't even have it all the way stirred in, but as you can see, it's turning into this gooey substance. So we're going to let that set you back down there. Hopefully you can see as best as you can. Get this all stirred in nicely. There we go. And there we are. So now we're going to let this, again, come up to a boil. Like all the way up to a boil. And you're going to want to, when you're doing these, you're going to want to stir them quite regularly, so you don't burn things on the bottom. It's like, once I let it sit for a minute, I don't know how well you were able to hear that quick bubbling sound. That's from the slightly cooler jam hitting the very hot bottom as I stir it around. And so it kind of real quickly bubbles up just a tiny little bit. Alright, so I'm going to let this go for a few moments while it starts coming up to temperature, although it looks like it's already kind of doing it. So maybe I'll keep recording going. It's already looking pretty good though. So you can kind of see already it's already sort of gelling a bit. And some of that is probably from both the pineapple and the apple. Because both of those things, even though the pineapple's been canned, and so that's gonna kind of wreck some of its natural pectin. They both pineapple and regular apple have so much natural that it's probably helping this set up already. You gotta be careful though that you don't jump the gun and pull it off before it's cooked properly too. Because while this looks, just by the way it's running off the spoon, which I wasn't pointing it at, see how it's kind of not all just running together and dripping from the same spot on the spoon. It's because it's already like partially gelling. even though it's hot. The problem is if you jump it too quickly with that, it may still not set, and you may end up with this like thick syrupy substance instead of jam. So though when you're testing, this is actually how I usually test to see if it's gelling, is pulling my, stirring with my spoon and then pulling it out and seeing how it runs. And you can see as whatever was on there cools, like it's kind of solidifying and drops and not really dropping as much there. That's kind of what you're looking for, actually, from a jam or jelly. So we're going to let this go here for a minute or two. We'll come back to it in a minute here. See where we're at. All right. There we go. Not that you can see anything because of all the dang steam. There we go. As we can see, still kind of doing what we were doing a couple minutes ago there. Not as thick, but that's largely because it's much, much hotter now. If you look at the spoon kind of near the handle here, you can actually almost kind of see some divots forming in a little bit of jelly that's left on the spoon, because it cools and then it cools, and so then some of it hardens and then it runs around it. So I think we're gelling up quite nicely. Like I said, you can still see them kind of forming separate drops too, which is a good sign. We're going to just let this go for a moment or two more, and then we're going to be ready to throw it into the jars. Or not throw it, but fill the jars. Yeah, we're good. Okay, so pull that on off. Now, I like to, as I've said in a previous video, and I'm sure I will say dozens more times, I like to set my pot in my sink here, so I don't have to worry about it burning my countertops, and that lowers the height of it, so it's nicer to go with my jars, so I'm not having to reach over as much. So let's come over, because I have not grabbed my handy dandy canning funnel and ladle. So there's that. Set you guys right here. And as always, I kind of like to have more jars than I think I'm going to need, just in case. Oh, one other thing I need to do. Hang on. So as anyone who's watched any videos before knows, I like to use my pressure canner for everything. So water level is just over the grate that sits on the bottom, so the cans don't sit directly on the burner or on the bottom of the pot. Water's just over top of that. I've got the burner set for, we'll go 6 for right now, because we want this to start heating up so we don't have cold water and putting our hot jars in there, because that is a good way to get broken jars in your canner. And take it from me, that's an annoying mess to clean up. So we'll just go through then and start filling our jars. I usually, for jams and jellies, I don't know how well you'll be able to see really. Pretty decent. So I set my canning funnel in, and basically I fill right to the bottom of the funnel. Just past the bottom, because that usually then is going to give enough headspace so that as it cools, the lid will vacuum seal properly. You don't want to fill them too full, because then your lids may not seal right. And you don't want to fill them too empty, because then you're, well, basically it's mostly just because you're wasting jars. Like, I could fill these all these jars half full. But if I was going to do something like that, why don't I just get smaller jars? Yeah. Because they do make smaller jars than this. So then we just go through, fill our jars. And one thing you might want to do that I kind of goofed up on when I was getting my ingredients, even though this is going to work just fine, when you're doing this, you may want to use crushed pineapple instead of the pineapple tidbits, because the crushed pineapple is going to have smaller pieces in it, and so it'll be a little easier to spread, whereas this is going to have fairly good sized chunks of pineapple in it. Now, that being said, if you want fairly big chunks of pineapple in it, then I absolutely would use the tidbits, like I did. But if you want something that's a little more spreadable, I would say go with the crushed instead. Kind of looking like I might have guessed almost the exact right number of jars for this. We're coming down to the end, and I've only got 6 jars left, so that's kind of nice. Love it when that happens. And it doesn't happen often. It's going to be close one way or the other. I feel like I'm either going to have one too many or one not enough. Which again, either way, that's absolutely fine. Ooh. I don't know if there's enough in the bottom of the pan to make one more jar. I think there is. I need to go get a spatula to scrape though. Let's move you there. Hopefully you can kind of see. Of course, obviously this pot is going to be hot when you're doing something like this, so be careful that you're not burning yourself. Ooh, just a tiny bit extra even. which works out nicely because then I've got little jars that I save from other things for just such a moment. Old pimento jars specifically. And we'll throw this last tiny little bit into this pimento jar. Like so. And I'll just throw that in the fridge. That doesn't taste too bad. And we'll let that be for the family. So there we go. There's that part. Now, throw all of our dishes in here to wash at the same time. So then it's just the normal, anytime you're canning anything, you're gonna clean around the rim of your jars real good. Now let me show you something too. So this is starting to cool a little already. You can already see it's kind of solidifying some, so, which is fine. It's actually a good sign that our jam is doing that. So that should mean then, once they're done processing, they'll set up real nice. Okay, so then the way I do things is, you know, since I've got my jars set up in this little grid basically, as I get each row of the grid wiped and with lids on them, they go into the canner. Now I know on my canner, because of the size and shape and everything, your canner might be different, and if you're water bath canning, that's going to be different as well. You know, so if you're water bath canning, you want to make sure before anything goes in that the water is at a full boil first. With my pressure canner, it's much more of a just making sure it's not cold. And it is starting to steam in there too, so it's probably not too far off going to be able to come up to a boil anyway. So, what was I saying? But anyway, yeah, with your canner, you know, I know in my canner, each layer in my pressure canner, because I can do 2 layers, holds 12 of these half-pint jars. So I know, given that I have 20 here, I'm going to need 2 layers. But then I've got that first layer in. So then I'll use this little guy, just like the thing on the bottom. I got that first layer in. This just rests gently on top. Then I'll put the second layer of jars on top. You can maybe kind of hear the pot is starting to get up to almost a simmer, which means we're doing just fine. Which means by the time I get the rest of these jars in, I'm slide the lid on, it shouldn't take but a few minutes for it to come up to pressure and lock, and then a few minutes beyond that to come up to our full pressure, and we can start our time. Something I want to take a moment to talk about while I'm doing this. I have noticed through my experience that when you're getting lids for your canning, Ball makes the best lids. I have had, feel a little bit of jam still on there. I have had the least amount of problems with Ball lids, getting them to seal, getting them to stay sealed, etc. So, when you're buying those things, my suggestion, spend a little extra money, get Ball. For your lids, at least. For your jars, well, that can vary. These jars in particular, actually, that I'm using right now, are Mainstays is the brand, which is the Walmart store brand. And part of the reason I got them at all to begin with was because they were less expensive than Ball by a lot. And the other reason is they had these smooth sides, so they're much better for me putting my labels on. And so I tried them out. I found the jars are great. The lids are a little questionable sometimes. They work all right most of the time, so it's not too huge of a deal. But the lids are a little questionable. And we can already see in here, it sounds like our canner is boiling. So that is good. That means all I gotta do is come get my lid. Throw it on there. Oh, didn't stay locked. Oh, I turned it up to high. That was part of the reason. Okay, so I already got my 5-pound weight on. Let's see if we can't get this to... No. Alright, so we just gotta wait for this to come up to pressure and then set our time. So we'll let that do its thing here for a minute or two. And we'll come back and check on it soon. Okay. We're back. I don't know how well you can hear the hissing, but I can hear it just a little bit. So it should be just about up to pressure. Yeah? Maybe we weren't as close as I thought. Nope. Hang on. There it is. Alright. Turn that down to about 4.5. Set a timer for 5 minutes. And then that'll be done. Now, if you're water bath canning, you're going to want to let it run for about 10 minutes. And remember, if you're water bath canning, the time starts when the canner comes up to a full rolling boil again. So, there we are. We got about 4.5 minutes left. So we'll come pull that off at that time. Okay, here we go. As you can see, I've already removed the pot from the stove. Just be careful because that steam can be very hot. There we go. Lids are already popping. You just want to carefully remove everything. Like so. Now with jelly especially, you need to let it sit. So like once you remove it from your pot, whether you're water bath canning or pressure canning it, jelly needs to sit. You don't want it jostled. You don't want to do a lot with it. You want to make sure it's, on a table with some insulation beneath it so the bottoms don't cool too quickly and break your glass. But then just let it sit there for 12 hours, kind of at a minimum. 24 if you can manage it. And just let it sit and let it set, gel, etc. There we are. So our double batch of carrot cake jam got us 20 jars. So not too bad for, I don't know, an hour's work or so, hour and a half, something like that. Not counting cleanup that I haven't done yet, but I'll get to that in a minute. So anyway, there we are. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope some of you try the recipe out and let me know what you think of it. I know from my taste of it, I thought it turned out really good. The little bit that was in the pot, and I tried it. So yeah, let me know what you think. Throw your thoughts in the comments. Like, subscribe, all the normal things someone with a YouTube channel asks you to do. And in the meantime, have a great day. Have a great time out there, and we'll see you in the next one.